Hi everyone, I'm April and you're watching the Tangled Cat Speaks. This is going to be another book edition. I read and listened to a lot in the last couple of weeks. So let's get started. Before we do that, let me just go ahead and reintroduce myself again, just in case I have some new subscribers, which I think I do. I live here in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is just northwest of Albuquerque. I generally knit and crochet and cross stitch and also read. So I do split up my crafty videos and my reading videos and just kind of give you an idea of what I'm doing throughout or with my time. So what did I read in the last couple of weeks? Well, let's start with listening. I actually did only 3 audiobooks, which is crazy because I usually go through audiobooks like fast. But this time I only did a few. The first one is Cryo Burn. Actually, no, I did 4 because I did Cryo Burn, which is by Lois McMaster Bujold. It's the last of the main books in the Vorkosigan saga. It's a sci-fi series set in outer space, and it follows one particular character throughout the whole series from the time when his parents met and he was conceived, and then as he grew up. So that was the last main book in the series. And I really enjoyed the whole series. Had a really, really good time with it. I think there was 14 books. They were really short, so easy to get through. We did some friends of mine on a Discord that I'm on and myself, we did those 1 book a month. So it's been a long time that we've been reading these, but it's been nice to kind of go through and talk about what we thought about each book throughout this whole thing. So I had a really, really good time with that. The other audio book that I did was Gentleman Joel and the Red Queen. And I actually DNF'd that one. I didn't like it from the get-go. It was one of those where they were trying to retcon some stuff. I liked how Cryo Burn ended, and I felt like that wrapped up the whole story, and it felt like this book was tacked on. And I think it was written maybe like 7 or 8 years after the series had ended. So it just kind of felt like it was just tacked on. They were just trying to see if they could squeeze more out of this series. It didn't feel like it had the same tone, and I didn't like that they were suddenly bringing in elements to a character or to a set of characters that just hadn't been there before, and suddenly, oh yeah, this was the whole going on the whole time, and now here's what's happening with it. And it was weird. I didn't like it, so I didn't finish that one. And I am not the kind of person that has a problem with putting down a book, DNFing it. DNF means did not finish. I don't have a problem with DNFing a book if I'm not enjoying it, and I didn't enjoy that. I gave it about 50 pages. I didn't like it. It was a completely different tone for those characters, and it really bothered me. So I didn't finish that one. So that was the Vorkosigan saga by Lois McMaster Bujold, and I, for the most part, really, really enjoyed the entire series, literally except for that last book that I didn't finish. Okay, so then I had some time on my hands as far as audios go, so I had 2 short novellas on Audible that I had bought a while back, and I like to have some of those really short ones that are like under 2 hours, just in case I have extra time to pick something up and I'm not ready to commit to a longer book. So one of those is Henrietta and Eleanor, and this is basically a retelling of the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story. But instead of Jekyll and Hyde, this is Henrietta and Eleanor. I think they are still Jekyll and Hyde is the last name for this book. I can't remember. But anyway, this follows Henrietta, and we find out later on that she's also Eleanor. It was really good. I had fun with it. It was super short. It was good for, when I'm driving and I'm just kind of I didn't have to pay too close attention to it. And it was actually more of a, most audiobooks are it's just the narrator reading the book word for word, no background noise or anything like that. And it's just literally reading the book. This one was more of like an audio adaptation. There was music involved, and it was more acting, kind of like a radio play. And I really enjoyed that. And one of the character, or the actress who did Henrietta and Eleanor, was the actress Holiday Granger, which I like her. I've seen her in, I can't remember the name of I think it's Strike. It's a show on HBO. She works for, her character, Holiday Granger's character, works for a private detective. And so I really like her, and she did really well with the two different voices for each of the opposing characters. I had a really good time with that. And then the other one that I picked up that was super short was, I don't really do romance, but it was there. It was one of the shorter ones, and I thought, oh, why not? And this was called What the Hex. It's basically kind of like a romance, I guess maybe a paranormal romance, you could call it. They're witches, and I think they're outside of Florida. They're somewhere down in the Caribbean on this little island that nobody could get to except this few sets of families that live there. And the main character is going back because she moved away. She didn't want to be part of the whole witch scene with powers and everything. So she kind of gave all of that up and decided to do something else and have a career in New York. Well, she comes back and decides, I'm going to go ahead and go because my sister is getting married. And then there's a whole big old thing with her sister's groom is possessed by a demon, and now the whole family is under its enchanted spell, and so she's got to figure out how to save everyone. And it's really one of those instant kind of love things, because she falls in love with a character that she hasn't seen in forever, and of course he was her nemesis growing up, and now suddenly they're in love, and it's your basic silly romance. And it was cool. It was all right. I was just listening to it, like I said, just to have something on for background, because I wasn't ready to start another big book. I'm not really into romance very much, so this one was okay because it was super short. It was good for what it was, but it wasn't my favorite thing. And that is it for audiobooks. I'm almost done with this book. I think I've got about 20 pages left. Life in the Medieval Cloister, and this is by Julie Kerr. This is a nonfiction book, literally about the lives of, they mostly talk about monks, but they do talk about nuns as well, in the medieval times. I don't know why I wanted to read this. I found it was free. I was like, well, that looks kind of interesting. And I just kind of picked it up on a whim. I wanted to give it a home, I guess. And so I decided, and lately I've been deciding to try to put some more nonfiction into my life. And I picked that one up this time, and I actually am really enjoying it. It's kind of dry, but it's just interesting, the things that they did and their strict lifestyle within the walls of this cloister, and it's crazy. So I'm really enjoying it. I've only got a few pages left, so I'm considering that as done. The other physicals that I did, they weren't mine, were the Attack on Titan books that I've been getting from the library. And those are volumes 13 through 18. So I did 6 of those, and those go by, I can read a volume in an hour. So I got 6 volumes done. And there was, I think, 2 or 3 in this group that I was not really vibing with. I was just kind of meh on. And then it got back to the last couple were really, really exciting. So I'm still enjoying Attack on Titan. And there's 34 volumes, and like I said, I just did up to 18. So I'm more than halfway through with this main series. And I think I mentioned when I first started doing Attack on Titan that thinking of going through and doing all of the spin-off kind of manga that were in this same Attack on Titan world. But I don't know, I might not do that. This is a lot, and I'm only halfway through. We'll see how I feel when I get done with all 34 volumes, and then see if I want to go back and do these little side storylines. So we'll see. We'll see how I feel. But at this point, I'm kind of on the fence if I want to do that. But so those are the only physical books that I did. The rest are all ebooks. And boy, did I have a good time with these. The first one I'm going to talk about is Agatha Christie's The Moving Finger. That one is about a small community, like most of Agatha Christie's books are. It's a small village type community, and there is someone writing letters anonymously to all of the village people and calling them out on indiscretions and stuff, just nasty letters. People are trying to figure out who did it, which one of these people was really upset by the letter they got, or what do they have to hide? Was what their letter said was true, and why is this other person over here saying they're the only person that ever got a letter? Those kinds of things. So it was really fun to find out who the letter writer was. Really, really fun. And that one was super short, so it went by really fast. Then I picked up the first book in a series. This is called the Shadows of the Apt series, and it's by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this is a fantasy series, but instead of having like elves and dwarves and ogres and stuff like that, all of this is based on different peoples that are hybrid of bug and human. And they don't ever explain how that happens. But you've got wasp people, and then there's beetle people and fly people and dragonflies and moth and ants and spiders, and I think there was even a scorpion. Like there's just all of these different species of bugs / people, and they all have their own little clans and cities and whatever. And for the most part, some of them get along, some of them tolerate each other for political or commercial situations, stuff like that. So they get along, but they're not the best of friends. And then there's some that absolutely just dislike everybody, and so they kind of stay off in their own little part of the world, and they just shun everyone else. And then there's the ones that are trying to overtake everyone. So the first book in this series is called Empire in Black and Gold. Now, the bug species that is trying to take over everyone are the wasp people. And there is some magic involved, because these aren't like literal wasps or literal beetles. They're people. They're humanoid creatures. They just have certain physical characteristics of the bug species that they belong to. For instance, fly people can literally fly. They can hide their wings, but when they need them, they can pop out their wings and just go zip, zip, zip everywhere. The beetle people are known to have really short statures, and they're very strong and powerful. Spider people are usually very graceful, and they can kind of manipulate you with your emotions and your thoughts because they're just so mesmerizing. Stuff like that. So they have these different things. Let's see. The wasp people can manifest wings. They don't have them all the time, but when they need them, they can use a little bit of like they call it the art, but which is basically kind of like a magic, and they can make them appear, and they can literally fly. They also have what they call their sting. They don't actually have like a wasp stinger, but they can point their hand at you and some blue fire will come out of the hand and sting you, kind of like electricity. Same thing, dragonflies can also manifest wings, and they're just super fast. They're like the best flyers. But so the wasp people are trying to take over and just dominate and rule everything, and they're literally just conquering all of these cities, and they're enslaving all of the other bug people. So now they're headed towards where the beetle people are the most prolific, and they're like, one of them is like, I told you this was going to happen, we need to fight. And everybody's like, no, 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 they're not coming here, they're going to bypass us and go and take over the ant people or whatever. So of course it comes to pass that this particular character is right, and now suddenly everybody's got to come together and fight the wasp people. So it's really, really fun. Something very, very different than I've ever read as far as fantasy. And I ate up this book. Let's see, how many pages was this one? It's a big book, 625 pages, and I ate that book up within a few days. I just could not put it down. I had so much fun with it, and I think there are 10 books in the series. 8 or 10 books, I can't remember, but I am so excited to get to the next book. But I'm again doing this as a read along on this Discord, and we're doing one book a month. And I mean, you can go ahead and read faster than that if you want to, or slower, but I'm going to stick to the schedule and do one a month. So that's why I've been trying to like put in other things here and there just to pass the time, because I thought that book was going to take me all month because it's big. And it didn't. I just ate that one up. So I had so much fun with it. And I can't wait to get to the next book in April. So after I finished Empire in Black and Gold, I picked up another book that I had been wanting to read. I don't know what it is about kaiju, but lately I've been wanting to see if there are books that are based on kaiju. And if you don't know what kaiju are, they're basically what Godzilla is. They're big giant creatures that are like nothing else on the planet, and they're so super astonishingly huge, like building size creatures. And I honestly don't know what made me look up. I think it was because I was watching Pacific Rim recently. And by recently I mean like a few months ago. But I had been wanting to read this one, Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. I didn't know what it was going to be about, other than it was going to have kaiju in it. And this one is really fun. It was really short. I think it was less than 300 pages, maybe even closer to 200. But it's this guy. He's working for a company and he gets laid off. And he's jobless, and he's just kind of figuring out what he can do because he's got to pay rent and this and that and the other thing. And he ends up getting a job as a food delivery person. And one of the people he's delivering food to on a regular basis, they start talking a lot. And the guy tells him, hey, if you're looking for another job, I've got an opening where I work. And he's like, well, what is it? He's like, I can't really talk a whole lot about it, but it has to do with taking care of some large animals. And so he's assuming it's going to be something to do with like elephants or giraffes or something, those kinds of large animals. Come to find out, it's not. It's kaiju. But it's fun, it's fast-paced, and it's funny. It definitely doesn't take itself too seriously. So it's just one of those light reads that it's just zooms by. Really fun, really engaging, but you don't feel like it's just such heavy science fiction that your brain is melting. It was just fun. The dialogue and there's a little bit of sarcasm and dry humor in it that I really enjoyed it. And then it's Forgotten Planet. I think I mentioned last time. Was it last time? Yeah. Starting in February, one of the booktubers on YouTube that I watch is doing books that are in the public domain that can be downloaded off of Project Gutenberg. He's doing one a month, and this is his list. He chose to do this, and he said, hey, if you want to read along with me, do that. So this month for March was Forgotten Planet by Murray Leinster. And this is basically Earth is not really livable, and they're going around trying to find different places to inhabit. I don't know. So they go to these planets that are not quite livable. They have certain conditions that make it possible for humans to live there, but it's not, they basically need to terraform it. So over hundreds of years, they go back to these planets and they drop down seeds and bacteria, and then later on it'll be plant life and animals and this and that, slowly trying to introduce these things to create an ecosystem that humans are familiar with. And this particular one, because apparently in this future, everything is still handwritten. And so there's a card for this particular planet that hadn't been named yet. And it was only in the basic parts of being seeded, meaning that they had certain plants and insects. But this card that all of this information was written on got lost somewhere in the shuffle, literally. And everybody even forgot that that planet existed. So for thousands of years, all that got through there was the basics of plant life and insect life. And most of the plant life, because of the conditions of the weather and stuff, most plant life didn't make it except for fungus and lichens. And because there's a lot of apparently all of these different conditions that make insect life good, all the insects grew to be super, super huge. Insects and arachnids, like spiders. So they're super, super huge. Well, here it is, several hundred years later, this pleasure spaceship crashed and landed on this forgotten planet, and now they have to survive in this world where there's big giant sized creatures, which is funny because that kind of leans into the kaiju, but not really, because these were meant to be there. Anyway, big giant creatures that are way bigger than humans, and they got to figure it out. And because nobody knows that they were there, they couldn't radio that that's where they crash landed, because everything was destroyed. They ended up being there, and I think it said for 40 generations. And because they're the inferior creature, they basically, and they didn't have any kind of technology whatsoever, over the 40 generations, they kind of devolved into this almost like cave people type of living. And the only thing that, they can really eat is the different types of good fungus, like mushroom, different, the good mushrooms and stuff, which were the size of trees. And any leftover bits of like beetles and like the legs and stuff, and they would, anything they could find that they could scavenge, because there was no way they were going to hunt these big giant creatures. And then there's one particular human after 40 generations who decides, I'm going to try something different. And so he goes on his own little adventure and finds out that he can hunt, he can make weapons, he can do these things, and he's trying to show his fellow tribes people that this can be possible and they can have a different, better life. It's really, it was written, I want to say, in the 1920s originally in pieces in magazines, and then later on it was kind of all assembled and rearranged into a novel form in the 1950s. So it's definitely dated, which is why back then they assumed that the future still had handwritten cards for filing and bookkeeping. So it's definitely dated, but it's fun, it's quick, it's a really short read. So if you can get past how dated it is and how kind of choppy it all is, because it was written in pieces and then like kind of reassembled. I don't think it was ever originally meant to be a single novel, but they kind of just pieced it together, Frankensteined it. And so if you can get past a little how choppy it is, it's a good time. It's a nice palate cleanser in between other books. So between Forgotten Planet, Kaiju Preservation Society, and Empire in Black and Gold, that's a lot of big giant creatures and or bugs. I just can't seem to get away from bugs lately because in some of the things that I've been watching on TV or movies have had to do with giant creatures and or bugs, and it's crazy. My daughter and I went and saw 65 with Adam Driver, and that had dinosaurs and giant bugs. What was we just watching recently? Something else. Oh, last night we were watching the Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle with Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart, and there's bugs in that, and I'm like, I can't get away from bugs. They're everywhere, bugs and giant creatures. It's really funny. So that leads me to the last couple of ebooks that I read. These don't necessarily involve bugs, but some of the science would relate to some of the science that was in Kaiju Preservation Society regarding size. It did kind of, some of my books just seem to be lately, this past month, were all kind of connected in some way. Like there was like a synchronicity of what I was reading, even though they were all completely unrelated and completely different. But there was something about this, like how the size of an animal, like theoretically animals can't get to be too big because their volume gets heavier faster than they get bigger. So the bigger they get, they're too heavy to even carry themselves around, is the theory. Which is, they mention that in Leviathan Falls, which is the last book in the Expanse series, the last main novel. And they're talking about something completely different, but they bring up that theory. And that theory was also brought up in the Kaiju Preservation Society because, of course, one of the scientists is like, well, how could these creatures even get that big? So it's just funny that even though all of the other books I read were kind of, my hands are just all over the place. All of the other books I read were kind of large creature, bug related, and then here comes the science fiction one with everybody in space and the same theory about how animals got that big, or could possibly, or maybe not possibly get that big. That scientific theory ended up in this other book. So, like I said, there's a little bit of synchronicity that's been going on this month, and it was just kind of weird but interesting. So Leviathan Falls was the last book in the series, and man, it was a wild ride. It was a really, really good ending to a really, really, really good series. And I had such a good time, and I'm glad that I own these books. They're on ebook, but I'm glad that I have them because that's definitely one that I think I would like to read again sometime in the future. But I had so much fun with it. This whole series regarding an alien substance that comes and creates all of these different they call them ring gates, and they're able to somehow all of a sudden travel to all of these different universes in a way that they were never able to before this substance showed up. And then that led to a lot of other problems, and there was also fighting between Martians and Earth people and the people who lived in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, and now we've got all of these different rings opening up more universes. So that meant that there's more places to send people to live on different planets, and it's just all of this fighting and battles going on, and you come to fall in love with the main characters because you're just with them through so much. So this was a really, really good ending to a really amazing science fiction series. I had such a good time with The Expanse. And then the last ebook that I read was also part of the Expanse series. It's a small novella that was only, I think it was like 75 pages. And that happens after Leviathan Falls. And this basically takes you back to a particular character that you didn't hear anything about and after, I want to say, the 5th or 6th book, because there are 9 books in the main series. And you never really find out what goes on with this person. And now this last novella tells you a little bit of about this character. So it was really good. I mean, you could totally end it with, you could actually read, I think there's 4 or 5 novellas interspersed in between the main big novels. And you could totally read the whole series without reading any of those novellas. But they really do add a little bit of interest and a little bit more backstory to certain parts of the whole overall tale. So I'm glad that I read all of the little novellas too. But I'm done with that series, and it's crazy. So I finished 2 really, really long series now in March, which is good because I did start this Shadows of the Apt with all of the Bug People series. Really, really excited about that. That is all that I have been reading and listening to this month. Now, out of all of those, let's talk about my 100 book challenge, where I cannot buy any new books until I've read 100 books that I own. Now, me personally, I am including audiobooks and ebooks in that. So let's see. Out of all of those that I read, which was a lot, mostly because there was 6 volumes of Attack on Titan, I don't own any of those. But let's see. As far as the physical books, the Cloister one, own that one. And then the ebooks, I owned Moving Finger, Empire in Black and Gold, Kaiju Preservation Society, Leviathan Falls, The Sins of Our Fathers. So that means that this month, this past couple of weeks, I did 6 books that I own. So that brings my total of up to 26 out of 100. So I'm more than a quarter of the way through my challenge before I can buy any more new books. So I'm making progress. Yay! And out of all of those that I own, only one of them is the physical book. And so obviously I'm keeping the ebooks. So this one I will be donating as soon as I'm done. I'll probably take it back to the little free library and see if somebody else wants to read about medieval cloisters. So that is it this time, and I really thank you for spending a little bit of time with me, listening to me ramble about the books that have come into my life this last couple of weeks. And I hope you come back again. Bye.